Okay, so here's our identifiers right here on the board. Okay, this is what we're looking for. This is the second beast. How many of these identifiers came from the Bible? Every one of them. So number one, it arises in a relatively unpopulated area. Number two, it espouses Christ-like principles. Jesus said things like, if the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus said that He had come to preach liberty to the captives. This nation would espouse Christ-like principles. Number three, this nation would not have a king. This nation would not have a queen or any kind of a monarchy. This would be a nation that was ruled governmentally differently. Number four, this nation has to arise sometime around the time the first beast is going down, which was in 1798. So we're looking for a beast to come up sometime around 1798. This nation is going to grow up quietly like a plant, not primarily through conquering other nations. And number six, this beast would eventually grow to have unprecedented worldwide power and influence. Now, is there any question in anybody's mind who we're talking about here? I mean, it is just as plain as the noonday sun. Who is this second beast of Revelation chapter 13? It could only be the United States of America. Let's see if it meets all of the identifying characteristics. Did this country arise in a new area, a relatively unpopulated area, as opposed to the old world? Absolutely. Does this country espouse Christ-like principles, at least in concept and in principle? Yes or no? Absolutely. Not always in practice, but at least in principle. Number three, is there a king or a queen here? In fact, the exact opposite. When the Pilgrim Fathers and others landed here, they decided, our forefathers, we're going to talk about this in a moment, that they would start a government not with subjects, but with citizens. Did you hear what I said? There's not going to be a king that's reigning supreme over the lowly peasants, but we would have, instead of a kingdom with peasants, we would have a citizenry where people could, a government, let's say it this way, of the people, for the people, and by the people. Oh, that's a little different, isn't it? It would arise around what? 1798. Does that fit? The answer is yes. Does it grow up quietly like a plant, not primarily through conquering other nations? Absolutely. And has it grown literally, I mean almost overnight? Think about it this way. The United States of America is basically only 200 years old and is the most powerful nation that has ever existed in the history of the human experience. I mean, it just literally just whoop, came on the scene of action, and now, as a good friend of mine from Romania says, my wife is from Romania, he says, when the United States sneezes, the whole world gets a cold. Isn't that right? And I could give you instance after instance after instance of this thing. For example, the United States says, hey, listen, we want to invade Iraq, and the UN says no, and they say, tough. Yeah, we'll do whatever we want. It's like the old saying, where does an 800-pound gorilla sit? He sits wherever he wants to, right? And so Tony Blair from the United Kingdom and a few others have figured this out. They've said, you know what? He's the toughest kid on the block. Better join him. That's exactly what's happening. Now, let's go through and see if this all fits together. This is from the New World Compared with the Old by G.A. Townsend. Notice what he said. The mystery, speaking of the United States, the mystery of her coming forth from vacancy like a silent seed, we grew into a what? An empire. Oh, that's exactly the biblical language. Like a silent seed coming up slowly, almost imperceptibly. Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith, page 578. Emerging amid the silence of the earth, adding daily to its power and strength. So it fits that qualification very nicely. The founding fathers of the United States fled political and religious tyranny. They had been in the old world where they had seen that religious tyranny and political tyranny basically got them nowhere except persecution. If you didn't have the luxury or the fortune of being born into one of the royal families or somehow being associated with royalty, you could be in a very bad way. And so when they landed, you know the stories, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but they would get off those boats and they would kiss the ground because this was a new place where they didn't have to worry about the king saying thus and so and the pope saying thus and so. It was a new land where they could try a new governmental experiment. And I believe in my soul of souls that God opened this nation up right on time. I believe that with every fiber of my being. Does it meet the time element? Absolutely. The first Constitutional Convention was convened on May 25th, 1787. Is that around 1798? Yes or no? So just as the one beast is going down, what's the other beast doing? Coming up. And the Declaration of Independence was signed July 4th, say it with me, 1776. So one is going down and one is coming up. Meets that specification perfectly. The Declaration of Independence, I love this. We hold these truths to be what? Self-evident. That all men are created what? Beloved, do you know how revolutionary that is? I mean, we take these things for granted here in the United States of America. That is so revolutionary. I mean, beloved, in the old world with the royal hierarchy and the oligarchies of kings and queens and princes, not everybody was created equal. I mean, to even suggest that the peasant was the equal of the king is laughable. And here they say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, of course including women as well, are created what? Equal. That they are endowed by their what? Creator with certain unalienable, that means cannot be taken away, certain unalienable rights, that among these are, say it with me, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Just a little bit of hedonism thrown in there at the end. A few of you got that. United States Constitution, the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of what? Religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. As George Thorogood Marshall said, your rights end where my nose begins. Can you say amen? Hey, you're right. You can do whatever you want, but your rights end right at the very place that my nose begins. If that makes sense, say amen. So in the United States of America, if you want to worship that pulpit, you want to start a whole religion where you worship that pulpit, and you want to dance around the pulpit and say, this is the Creator God, this pulpit here. Could you do that in this country, yes or no? It would be foolish, it would be illogical, it would be unusual, but you could do it. Amen. Absolutely, that's the point. You see, they were so under the thumb of religious and political tyranny that when they got on these new shores, they said, we're tired of the popes and we're tired of the kings. Amen. So they established this radically new government. I mean, it was an experiment. It was the American experiment. A government of the people, for the people, by the people, where everyone is equal and citizens vote leaders. I mean, we take this for granted now. This was radical, beloved. Absolutely radical. What makes this nation great? Two central freedoms, two central liberties make this nation great. Civil liberty, that is freedom from a king, and religious liberty, that is freedom from a pope. If you want to be even more technical, you'd say republicanism and Protestantism. Those are the two principles that make this nation great. Republicanism, sometimes we think we live in a democracy, but really we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, which is a representative democracy. We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. A republic is a representative democracy. The idea of republicanism is that the people can govern themselves. If you believe that, say amen. We don't need kings. That doesn't say that sometimes our presidents have not acted that way, but I'm saying in principle, in what, everyone? And we don't need popes. We can worship how we want to worship in this country. We have the right to be wrong. Someone say amen. Absolutely incredible. So religious liberty is freedom from a pope. Civil liberty is freedom from a king. Look at George Washington. Who could have said it better than this in 1789? Mr. Washington, first president of the United States of America, said, every man conducting himself as a good what? Citizen, and being accountable to who? God what? Alone, for his religious opinions ought to be protected in worshiping the deity according to the dictates of his own good conscience. Can you say amen? So now no one's going to come and say, you'd better bow to the cardinal, you'd better bow to the pontiff, you'd better bow to the prelate. Mr. Washington said, we've had enough of that. You can worship God according to the dictates of your own good conscience. You want to be a Protestant? You can be a Protestant. You want to be a Muslim? You can be a Muslim. You want to be a Catholic? You can be a Catholic. You want to be an atheist? You can be an atheist. As long as what you do does not infringe upon my rights, where your rights end, my nose begins, you can worship God according to the dictates of your own good conscience. Amen. Beloved, that is one of the things that makes this nation great. I'll say it again. It's the right to be wrong. Look at this one, Benjamin Franklin. I love this. Whoo! When religion is good, it will take care of itself. One amen out of that. Mercy. When religion is good, it'll take care of itself. Amen. Amen. Now look at this. When it is not able to take care of itself, and God does not see fit to take care of it, so that it has to appeal to the civil power for support. Benjamin Franklin said, it's evidence to my mind that the cause is a bad one. You see what he's saying? Beloved, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Religion is good. It'll take care of itself. But the moment that the religious entity has to appeal to the civil entity for support and for money and for finances and for influences, he said, listen, if God can't support this thing, why, pray tell, should the secular government support it? Amen. Whoo, founding fathers.